This conference will now be recorded.
Yeah.
So the documents for this meeting are available on our website on the event calendar, which is wmc.wa.gov. I am Amelia Boyd, and I am the program manager for the Medical Commission and am the organizer for this meeting. So while a presenter is speaking, we will mute everyone except that presenter. When the presentation is finished, the committee members will be unmuted, and the chair of the committee, Dr. Karen Domino, will open the floor for committee discussion. Everyone will be unmuted when Dr. Domino asks for any public comment. For those of you joining us via the GoToMeeting platform, the chat is open for comments. If you are joining us via phone, please speak up if you have any questions once Dr. Domino opens the floor for public comment. And please refrain from making inappropriate comments or you will be removed from the meeting. And with that, I will hand it over to Dr. Domino. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everyone, for joining the meeting. I just wanted to go through, do we have some public members? I mean, we have people here from the public, Amelia, as far as we know, or have people signed in?
No, we don't have a sign-in, unfortunately. It looks like everybody that's here, I mean, Dr. Bundy's here. He's technically public.
Okay.
But it doesn't look like we have anybody we don't know in the room.
Nice presentation today, Dr. Bundy.
Who is,
Okay, I thought
who is CT?
we'd
That's
start
Corey.
with Mike Farrell. Sorry, I'm looking at this. Sun's starting to come up in my office, finally. And it's processing complaints against medical students, residents, and fellows. I know we've seen this before, and it went back. Can you tell us a little bit what you did and why we're seeing it again? Because we thought it was done, or at least I did.
Sure, and I'm going to share my screen so you can see it if you want to make changes. This was a proposed policy. It's never been adopted. It was brought to you in first draft was brought to you at the February commission meeting. There were some changes that people wanted to make, and so I made those changes and I'm bringing it back to you for adoption.
Does anyone have any? I read it. I thought it looked fine, but does anyone have any suggestions? I see Alden.
I have no suggestions. I thought it was really good. Thank you, Mike, for all your work on this.
Anyone else? Okay. Now, can you remind me? It's been oh, Dr. Howe. Is that you? You're very little on my screen here now.
No, I have nothing about it. I think that's good work, Mike.
So, can I just move that we recommend this for acceptance?
So moved. I'll move it.
Anyone want a second? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, thanks, Mike. This was great.
Is there an opportunity for public comment that I missed on this?
Oh, sorry. You're welcome to say something. I didn't know that we.
It's just a question, and maybe it's better addressed in a different venue. Simply, I would benefit from knowing what the commission's expectations are of WPHP, or if this changes any expectations with regard to WPHP and reporting. Historically, we have not reported medical students who are non-compliant with WPHP. The recourse is through the medical school, typically, through the Student Progress Committee, and ultimately through the Dean of Student Affairs. And then with residents and fellows, it's slightly different. And I'm not sure what the expectation is with regard to residents who are licensed. Obviously, we would, who are not under a supervisory training license, we would report per our statutory obligation. But there are residents who we interact with who, it's been a little bit of uncertainty from my perspective as to whether or not we report license. You know, what we've done is, if they are on a training license, we also tend to report. just so the commission has some awareness about those individuals. Now, if they weren't, but they're not independently licensed, is there anything, would you like me to do anything differently with regard to that, or do you want to take this to another venue?
Alden?
I would say, no, we don't want you to do anything different, but if somebody has a license and is a resident, they can moonlight. So we've got to know if they're not safe to practice. If they have a restricted, not restricted, but the whatever they call the temporary license that residents get in their first year, I mean, I don't want to make it hard, whatever's easy for you. But if they have a license, we have to know that they're not safe to practice.
I would probably default to continuing to report residents who are on training licenses only, and just let you all decide what to do under those circumstances.
That would be ideal.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's smart. If you've got a license, we should know about it if there's a problem.
Do we need to add anything on? I don't think myself that we do, but what do you, rest of you think?
I would also say that the same rules ought to apply to a medical student or resident who self-refers to WPHP before there's any serious problem, and they ought to maintain the same status that a full-scale physician who did that would be, and that is that we wouldn't know about it.
Mike, do you think we need to add anything, or is it sufficiently covered?
I don't think we need to add anything at all. I think that the reporting from WPHP should be the same for residents, for medical students, for fellows. And then the commission can use its discretion and this document to decide what to do.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, thanks, Dr. Bundy, for your comments. All right, Mike, you're on for the next one, medical marijuana cannabis authorization guidelines.
Okay, can everybody see this document? I'm scrolling up. Okay, so last year, a work group was formed among the four boards rather, that have licensees who can authorize marijuana. And the group came up with guidelines, and the commission wanted to insert language emphasizing extreme caution when authorizing medical marijuana for minors. If you recall, this was Dr. Harrison's urgent wish. The commission adopted guidelines on its own, separate and apart from the nursing commission, the osteopathic board, and the naturopathy board. And then the work group reconvened early this year and incorporated the medical commission's cautions about treatment of minors, made some other changes. And so this is being brought back to you for approval. It's changed a little bit. There's no significant changes other than the addition of the language regarding minors. And I'll scroll down to where I highlighted in yellow the language, which is Dr. Harrison's language. Here's part of it, and then down here is the meat of it, which is right here. You may recall going over this at a couple of commission meetings about a year ago.
Mike, I remember this well, but the question is, what are we doing with this? Isn't this a Department of Health document? Do they want us to scrap ours and take this, or what's the request?
Yes. The idea is that all four boards will adopt the same document. You'll have uniform guidelines, so all licensees will be operating on the same playbook. So it's a joint set of guidelines for all licensees who can authorize medical marijuana.
It's also a set of joint guidelines.
Pun not intended.
I don't have any problem with this. I read this and it says what we wanted it to say. And I sort of respect the idea that we should all be the same. So I would move to approve if there's no further, but depending on further discussion.
Anyone have any other discussion? I thought it dealt with the problem, the Dr. Harrison's comments, which were important, and it's in there now. So, any other comments? No? Anyone want a second to approve these? Good. All in favor?
Aye.
And great. So we'll move that on as well. Okay. Let me locate the next one. Processing complaints against licensees enrolled in Washington Physician Health Programs. All right. Sorry, these have been a little bit out of the order. So I apologize. I didn't have the list there. I just took down. I had some sent to me via email, so I was just going in my own order of when, in the order they were sent. So that one, my apologies for being out of order. So it's processing complaints against licensees enrolled in Washington Physicians Health Program. And that one was to use the appropriate terminology, which is not substance abuse, it's substance use disorder. And they were corrected here in red. And thanks for picking that up. I think Dr. Roberts picked it up. I don't know who else did. Thank you for noting the wrong terminology. Does anyone have any comments about that? No? Does anyone want to recommend approval of this with the change, the proper terminology?
So moved.
Okay. Someone seconded already. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. And then finally, last is the reduction of medical errors subcommittee presentation. And that's Mike Farrell's going to talk about that.
Yes, and I noticed that, and this is a discussion that the Rome Subcommittee had a couple weeks back, and that 4 members of this committee are on the Rome Subcommittee. So please jump in if you remember this differently or want to add something. But Confluence Health is probably the most active entity in submitting cases from their institution for CRP certification. They submitted a case recently and had some concerns with the way it was processed and the lack of communication, and they raised 5 concerns and did it very politely and very helpfully. So the Rome Subcommittee met a couple weeks back and discussed the 5 concerns. And to back up, the Rome Subcommittee was formed or reformed a few years ago as a subcommittee subordinate to the Policy Committee. So every recommendation coming out of the Rome Subcommittee comes to the Policy Committee and then goes to the full commission. So Dr. Randy Mosley, who is the person who runs the CRP program at Confluence Health in Wenatchee, and is very active in this process, submitted a case and then contacted me and had some concerns. And it was interesting getting his perspective on this because he opened my eyes to a number of things. Because, of course, I've never been a submitter, so this is valuable feedback. The first concern he had was that he didn't know how to submit a certification report to the commission. He said he looked on our website, there was no portal, there were no instructions, and frankly, he had a good point. people would submit it before by either submitting it to the investigator or submitting it to me because they know that I'm involved. Well, that's not a very transparent process. The Rome Subcommittee discussed this, and the idea that we want to propose is that we develop a web page, a link on the commission website, that will take it to a web page that explains what CRP is, what certification is, and how the commission handles cases in which they receive certification reports. So this would maybe have a portal on it to submit it. I think the group would rather wanted to have names and contact information. And I think the idea was that it would have Frida Pace's name as a director of investigations to submit the CRP certification report to, explaining when we would want to receive one and when we don't. Of course, we only want to receive one when we have an open case. If we don't have an open case, we don't want the certification report. There's no place to put it. And then a detailed explanation about how the commission processes it. Now, this is already in writing. We have it in our internal document. We have it in a procedure, but it's not really publicly available. So the idea was that we'd have a web page providing information, which could also promote this idea, and then explain what to do when you have a report, how it works, and how the commission will handle it. So that was concern number one. Anybody want to discuss that further or have any questions?
Hi,
Okay.
Mike, I have a question.
Okay.
So I thought historically it was up to the respondent to provide a copy of that and not the hospital. So I thought that's how we were approaching these.
It's either one. It could be the respondent or the hospital. In 4 to 5 cases we had, I believe it was the institution who submitted it to us. Another case, it was the respondent's attorney. It could be either one.
But wouldn't it be the respondent would request the hospital to provide it, or does the hospital act independently of the respondent's request to provide the form? Or I would think the respondent would be in the driver's seat. Okay.
Absolutely right. The respondent, yeah, the respondent would have to request that the institution provide it.
Okay.
In reality, the institution would probably say, we're going to submit this. Do we have your permission?
Okay, concern number 2 was that in the letter that we send to the respondent notifying him or her of the investigation, there's no acknowledgement that the certification report has been received by the commission. That's true. We have our process is that a staff person sends a notification letter. That staff person would have no reason to know that a certification report even exists unless it happens to come in his desk that day. The commission, the subcommittee discussed this, and they thought that it would be a good idea if the submitter was notified when the commission receives the certification report. And then we discussed, well, how would this happen? And the idea that we came up with was that the director of investigations might be the person in the best position to know when a certification report has come in and be able to notify the submitter, we received the certification report and it's now part of the investigative file.
So are you just asking for like a return receipt or saying we got it, or is there something more involved than that?
Well, Confluence thought that the notification letter, which as you know is a form letter, it's almost identical in every case, made no acknowledgement of this. They want some kind of acknowledgement. I don't know what format that would take. I think it'd be fine to make a phone call. If we could make the call.
Okay, well, the notification letter to the respondent goes out when we start an investigation. So we haven't even gotten into any of the meat and potatoes of an investigation. So I wouldn't think the CRP report would have been received by then.
It can come in at any time. The one that Confluence sent in, they sent in with the same envelope as the report of the payment.
The other thing that I would sort of point out real quick is that we're not talking about 1,000 of these cases. And so whatever increase we're doing right now is a very small increase, but a very important increase in the amount of work that the investigations department would be asked to do. But it is important.
True, but we are revamping our notification letters based on the discussion that we had with WISMA. And so I don't know what notification letter y'all are talking about. Is it the one the investigator sends out when they first get the investigation, notifying the respondent of the complaint? Or is it's some other notification letter down the road?
Let me distinguish between what Confluence asked for and what the subcommittee came up with a solution. Confluence said the notification letter didn't say anything about it. Well, we're not proposing that the notification letter be changed. We're proposing that there be some communication, perhaps a phone call. Maybe that's the best idea. Frida or someone else picks up the phone and calls Confluence and say, we got your notification letter, it's part of the file.
Okay, we'll have to work that out. I don't know.
So I agree with you, Melanie, that this is an important thing for operations to figure out. We don't need to tell you how to do it. But what we do need to tell you is that it really needs to get done.
So you're just requesting that at some point, Confluence or whoever the submitter is of the notification letter of the report gets notified that we received it.
That's right.
Yes, but I would say as soon as possible.
Their complaint was that they send it in, they don't know if they ever got it, right? Because whether it's part of the file or not, it's so what we're just asking is to find a way that someone could, you know, for the small number of these claims that have this, to be able to go back to them some way and say, we got it. It's part of the file for the respondent.
Well, I think if we're going to have a process where we have something on our website, we can build that into the process. So they'll get notified. I'm just not sure how and who will do that yet.
I think you guys should figure it out, right? In operations, yeah.
Yep.
I just want to add, the first few cases that we got, the person called me and said, I'm sending this in, who do I send it to? And I said, well, send it to the investigator with a copy to me. The last case, and this is the one from Confluence, he didn't get notified that we had received it. It turns out we never did receive it. So, and we found this out after the meeting, that we never got the certification report. And then it turned out that Confluence never sent it. I thought it was our bad, but it was never sent. So this illustrates, I think, why it's so critical that this communication take place. They assumed that we had it. We never got it.
Okay, but in that, and I'm not arguing the situation, but in that example, we're never going to notify them. So, because we never would have received it.
Correct.
But if we have a policy and it's explained on the website and they have a mechanism for determining how they would know that we've received it, then if they don't have whatever recognition they're supposed to get from us, they know we haven't received it. So,
Right.
you know, we can't send them a note saying we didn't receive anything, but we can provide a mechanism whereby when we receive it, two things happen. One, and first, it goes into the file. Two, they get notified that we got it and it went in the file. And how that happens, I think, Melanie, should be up to you. Well,
Yeah, no, we'll go ahead and review the process and map it out to add this step in so that the submitter gets notified.
Good.
don't want to understate the importance of it making it to the file, because I have this horror of it getting into somebody's email box and never making it to the file. So the notification needs to be, yes, we got it, and 2, it's in the file.
Okay.
Okay, concern number 3 was that there was nothing to indicate that the submission of a certification report would alter the course of an investigation. And of course, we've been firm, the commission has been firm that the receipt of a certification report does not alter the course of an investigation. When the committee discussed this, the committee decided that this goes back to providing information to the submitter at the outset. This can be on the webpage explaining the commission's process, including the fact that the commission will likely investigate a malpractice report, even if it's accompanied by a CRP certification report. The investigation will go on as any other investigation, but that the certification report will be part of the file and will be duly considered by the commission. So no change there. Concern number 4, Dr. Mosley called the commission, and whoever he talked to, he had questions about this, and he said the staff person who answered the phone didn't know what he was talking about. So if you can put yourself in Dr. Mosley's shoes, he doesn't know where to submit it to. He calls. He can't find anything on the website. He calls. The person who answers the phone doesn't know what he's talking about, which is not surprising because all the staff is not trained on this. And even if they are, it's not at the forefront of their duties every day. So the subcommittee talked about training, and perhaps the investigators and the attorneys could have training on CRP certification, so at least they have a basic understanding of the process. The director of investigations and the director of the legal unit are fully informed about CRP and CRP certification, and they know what to do with the report. Each individual investigator may or may not. Frankly, the training would be about 5 minutes long. Maybe it could be part of another training.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a problem training, but that's not who they're going to get on the phone if they just call the medical commission. So.
Yeah, I think again, this goes back to providing as good of information as we can on our website and directing people to the website. And then people who get that phone call should direct those calls to either Rick or Frida.
Well, the respondent's supposed to call the investigator, and if they're trained, they should have answers. But yeah, I mean, I think you could put on the website points of contact for submitters, I guess.
Okay, and the last concern was that the commission offers no help to the respondent during the process. The respondent felt left out there during the process. Well, this is a complaint that we receive quite often, that there's a lack of communication between the commission and the respondent between the time they get a notification letter and when the investigator contacts them. The subcommittee talked about this and said we can improve communication with the respondent during the process by creating, again, a web page with information on certification, by notifying the submitter of receipt of the report, and perhaps encouraging more communication between the investigator and the respondent during the course of the investigation.
Okay, well, this has already been in the works. We are revamping the notification letter to the respondent that is independent of the CRP process, but it's going to provide them with a lot of information that they don't have access to currently. For standard of care cases, we have to go down a different road for sexual misconduct cases. So we are doing that, and that's what I talked with WISMA about. So I think that, I I mean, we're not going to offer to help the respondent fill out anything, but we are going to give them information about our process, the timeline, a copy of the complaint if it's and redacted if possible, so they will understand the process.
Melanie, if they've had a CRP process, could that be added, a statement in that letter when the respondent gets to be able to give them some information so they can more easily notify the investigators?
The problem that I see here is this investigation is happening before the respondent knows that he has a complaint. So there's no CRP going on at the moment for us because it's too early in our process to know about a CRP. So when we find out about that, then we can talk with the respondent. But our process is to continue with the investigation and use the CRP. I guess that gets provided to the RCM and the staff attorney. But I don't know that impacts the investigator's work.
One thing we were trying to do, and it's hard, is at the if we knew about one of these things at the CMT, it would never go on to have the case authorized, which is where you do a lot of damage, emotional damage, and angst for the physicians. And during that thing, especially when it's already gone through a process like this within the institution, and that, or if we find out we get a malpractice example, a malpractice settlement, because part of this is a settlement on behalf of a particular physician, and that if that came with when the organization sent that settlement, if it's through a self-insured organization, they could also include a copy of this report, the CMT report, which would then allow those on the CMT conference to assess that and make a decision whether that case actually has to be authorized. So that was just, it's a challenge because if it's a malpractice insurance company, they're not going to have that done. But if in a self-insured organization, they can perhaps combine both of them.
Unfortunately, until the case goes to CMT and is authorized for an investigation, we can't do anything other than give you the four corners of the complaint. So we can't do any investigation on the complaint to see whether there's a CRP or not before you guys authorize it.
Warren has a comment.
Yeah, a complaint needs to be evaluated on its own merits that are presented to CMT, and to try to insert a CRP certification into that process, I think, is to add information that is not appropriate for CMT. We should just have the complaint and decide whether that complaint should be investigated or not. If we decide to investigate it and there's a CRP certification that goes along with it, that will come out in the investigation. If we decide not to investigate it, it doesn't matter.
Warren, would that be true if you were looking at, you have a self-insured organization that's giving you a mandatory report, and as part of the complaint, the mandatory report says, we settled for this amount of money, and the CRP was involved with this, and that just comes as part of the complaint.
That might, all right, that would, if that's part of the complaint, then we can, then that can be evaluated at CMT.
I think that's what we were trying to get at, because I think that's what.
But I don't think we need to have a mechanism to be sure that if there's a CRP, it gets included in the material that might go to CMT.
No, it's just in this circumstance that Alden was talking about, a self-insured organization that mentions it and may include that as part of their complaint, mandatory report.
Then it's part of the complaint. That's perfectly appropriate for CMT to evaluate it.
There's two things to think about. One is whether or not the organization used the CRP process and notifies the commission at the same time that they notify the commission of the payment. But the CRP certification is a process that takes place well after the fact. And the chances of those all coming together at the same time are really pretty remote. Well, anyway, there's, the investigative process takes a while. The CRP process takes a while. I think we've gotten, for at least one case I'm aware of, we got the CRP certification report at some point when the RCM also got the results of the investigation. All the stars and moon and everything else has to line up perfectly to make that happen. That's a rarity.
Yeah.
So, but getting back to what y'all were saying, if it's part of the complaint, it'll go to the CMT.
Right.
But we can't do any investigation to get it to go to CMT before y'all authorize an investigation. I know it's chicken and egg, but that's how the law is written. So.
Karen, what were you saying?
Sorry, I have double mutes. Yeah, we understand, Melanie. I think we're just talking about if it comes with the complaint. It won't be, it'll be uncommon, if it ever happens, but that would be, there might be organizations, example, settlement from UW Medicine on behalf of someone very well might come with that because it's handled internally, it's self-insured, and it can happen. It won't be a certification per se, but it will be to say that something like this was done at the institution and that. So you may have a few, or group health, or a few organizations like that. But I think it's unlikely, to have very many of those.
So there's a little bit of a difference between receiving a notification that someone has gone through a CRP process and that someone has had their CRP process certified in this particular instance. I would be far more likely to consider a certified CRP process than I would something that I received that had not been certified.
Well, I agree too. I just think that, it depends on the timing of things, and we would like the certification, or enough details to be able to analyze it ourselves. But these things occur way after the event.
And that was John's point is, if this ever happens, we can manage it. If it doesn't ever happen, then we don't have to manage it.
I think it's always important for the reporting institution to say that we implemented a CRP approach to resolving this particular adverse event. I think that's important information, and it's important information to let us know what you did to improve your processes, and what did the respondent learn. If that's all included, who cares if it's certified or not? We want to know what happened.
Well, and to a certain extent, I agree with you. On the other hand, that requires that we trust the institution without question, basically. And the purpose of the CRP process is you have public members, you have people that are totally uninvolved with it. And you're correct, John, that I think each case needs to be evaluated on how likely that case is to produce, how likely a disciplinary action is to produce a desired result. And if we've got enough information to say that it's irrelevant of whether it came by CRP or came from something else. But to just get a certification from a hospital that says we did a CRP process, it went well, the doctor learned this, I'm not sure I can believe that just right out of the box. I think the certification process has value.
Yeah, I guess I'm in the belief of the honest John approach, since I was responsible for doing CRP stuff. And if I said we did it, we did it. We wouldn't lie about it, but I get your point.
John, if it's you doing it, we'd trust it, but I don't know about anybody else.
Well, that's true.
I think back to the instances in which we've had things like a disruptive physician and we've asked the hospital if there's a problem and the hospital won't talk to us. You know, and they can say, I'm trying to protect this physician, here's a bunch of information, and the physician didn't even take part in the CRP process.
Yeah, well, again, some of that's peer review and some of it's CRP, so you have to distinguish between the two.
Absolutely.
Any more discussion on that point? No? Is there another point of this, Mike, your last thing, or not?
No, that was, those are all the concerns that were discussed by the subcommittee.
Mike, I'm just curious, I sent you an email and I'm not trying to put you on the spot or anything. I'm just curious what the status is of the CRP certification process. Just for all of you to know, there was some indication of some financial difficulties and some difficulties getting additional grants to fund the CRP process. Not sure if that ever happened or not, but it's been quite some time since I've had a conversation with Dr. Gallagher about where the program is.
Yeah, I've got a call into Karen Brigham, who said that she would get back to me this week, talk about a couple issues. And so I'm awaiting that phone call, and that's when I'm going to ask her about that, John. I don't know the answer.
Okay.
Mike, what do you want to do with this
I haven't heard
topic? Sorry. What do you want to do with this topic at the business meeting? I mean, there's no report. I mean, there's this, but do you want it discussed or just say it's there for information and we'll bring it back to you? Or
Yeah, that's a good question. I just assume we would make these recommendations to the full commission, but the recommendations don't need, Melanie, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think they need the blessing of the full commission for us to create a webpage with information and perhaps ask Frida to make phone calls and just tighten this up a little bit.
Right. This is not a policy that needs to be approved. This is mostly operational. So we just have to relook at our procedures when we get a CRP, look at our website. So it doesn't need a vote by the commission. In fact, I can just work off of what you've said at this meeting.
So should we just say that you're going to make changes to the website and figure out how to deal with these and leave it at that, or just not even bring this up at the business meeting?
Well, I think it would be good to talk about that you met and what you came up with and that we're working on it, maybe.
Okay, Mike, would you want to do a brief report of that?
Yeah, I'm happy to do it. It gets a little bit awkward at the business meeting because the road committee report comes up twice.
Oh, I see.
It comes up as a committee report, Dr. Chung, and then it comes up during policy. So maybe we need to clarify that.
Yeah. So we should do. I mean, I don't know. I don't know people's emails other than the commission emails, which are challenging, especially I don't know how many people will check it tonight. Do you know, can you get, I mean, is there some way that you could connect? And if we were in person, you could just take them aside, but
Yeah, I can.
Want to deal with that.
I'm happy to give a brief report. I can distill it down to a few sentences, and the main recommendation is provide more information on the website, to be more user-friendly, and it's going to be part of the broader effort to provide better communication with the respondents during the process. And I can talk to or email Dr. Chung and tell him how this discussion went. And then ask him if he wants to make that report or if he wants me to, and we'll let you know.
Okay. Is that okay, Amelia? I saw your green light on, and Melanie, that sounds
That's
good.
fine.
Mike will
Yeah.
be in charge of that. Great. Okay.
Oh, just to throw this out there, it would be nice if somebody lets me know since I get to have to ask.
Yeah. Does the Rome Committee come before the Policy Committee?
Yes, it does. It comes under committee reports, which is before policy committee.
Okay.
So just let me know too.
Yeah. Okay. Does anyone have any, were there any other items? I don't see any for Policy Committee. Any things we need to discuss, or can we adjourn? Okay. Well, goodbye, everyone. See you
Thanks,
via
everybody.
video tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Have a pleasant evening.
Yeah, you
Thanks,
too.
everybody.